6:30. We will call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Tate,
Present.
Councilmember Reyes,
Present.
Councilmember Stowe,
Here.
Vice Mayor Carrillo,
Present.
Mayor Flores.
Present. Please join us and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Carrillo, and also remain standing for the invocation or a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and lead us in an invocation? If not, a moment of silence, please. Thank you. You may be seated. We will now go into oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the council on any matter of interest, whether on the agenda or not. Unless additional time is authorized by the council, all commentaries shall be limited to 3 minutes. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record, please.
BNNS 1540 North Lombardi Street, Porterville. If you're going to limit me to 3 minutes, I might as well sit down now. I've been
Well,
trying to
when
get a response from the city for 2 years. Emails, phone calls. Milt Stowe and Patrice has finally got a response from her today, but I want to broach the subject of the traffic in West Porterville, and it's going to take me longer than 3 minutes.
How does council wish to proceed?
Let him begin speaking. and
Please.
we can-
Okay,
we
please
can-
start the timer over. Please start the timer over. Thank you.
Okay, I think most of you are aware of what I'm talking about. The traffic out in northwest Porterville, around, especially around Burton School, the Lombardi campus. I think I have some solutions I'd like to give to you. Matter of fact, let me send these maps up there now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice.
And as I say, I would have liked to broach this subject a couple years ago, but I've not been able to get anybody at the city hall to respond to me except for Milt. And none of the staff, city manager. Anyway, I am up here hopefully to show you what I think would be a solution. And there's about 3 groups of people out in West Porterville that are very, very unhappy. And I tried to get those groups to come down here tonight, and I said, let's come down here in a constructive manner and try to tell the city council what we really need out here, and they're refusing to do it. Their email they sent back to me today, it said, our groups will come and engage the city if there is a revote and there is an open public hearing with options to discuss openly without time limits with give and take. Unless until that happens, a meeting tonight is just a charade. With all due respect, this thing tonight is a distraction and a means to control opposition. I don't believe that. But it was a deep concern of theirs whenever you had the city council meeting and you approved the subdivision, and the consultant went on for 42 minutes, I think, and then everyone else was shut off at 3 minutes, and then the meeting wouldn't be reopened for them to get in for the rest of the people. Anyway, let me go through this here. The problem that we have out there is a lack of adequate east-west streets to carry the traffic, and of course the Burton School Lombardi campus. It's built on a one-way in and one-way out street. A little bit of history on this. When I found out about the proposed site for the school, I went to the council, and it's in the minutes. None of the council was in favor of that school being there. But anyway,
Please
going through
continue.
that, I'm going to get back, go through it a little bit more just in a few minutes. I went then to see Gary McKeel, the superintendent at that time, and told him, you know, one way in and one way out street is just, I can't believe you got this approved. And he said, well, there's some conditions, but if you'll just be quiet about it and let us get that school built, I'll assure you that we'll have traffic in and out of there so it won't affect your house. And Gary had never let me down until that time, and he retired and moved to Reno. Mr. Brown took over superintendent job. He's the one that approached the council on finishing this up. After Mr. Brown, there was Sharon Kemberg, and she actually sat in our living room and tried to, one day we couldn't get out of our driveway for like 30, 35 minutes. The cars wouldn't let us out. So she made some changes which helped some, but didn't do anything for the traffic. Then there was, after that, there's Sergio Mendez, who is the superintendent now. I had no idea at the time it'd be a charter school where most of the kids are driven to school. And so let's kind of fast forward to today a little bit. I contacted the California Department of Education as to the conditions of approval for that school to be. And I could not believe that it could be on a one-way in, one-way out street. They sent me back the conditions. Number one was to acquire, improve, and dedicate a minimum of 1,300 feet by 26 feet from Castle to the school, Castle Avenue, where it dead ends. Number two, if not, Burton School under Government Code Section 65402C, they would have to override the city's general plan consistency findings in order to proceed with the development of its project without access from Castle Avenue. Basically, it says that in order to get this school approved, it has to do one of these things to meet the conditions set out by the city of Porterville. They did neither. They didn't acquire an easement, and they didn't get the general plan amendment taken care of. I own the property that the extension of Castle would need to go through to get to the school. And I did have a conversation with Gary McKeel at one time, and he wanted to know if the street could be put through. And I said, well, we're not against that, but you know, we're not going to put the street in. And so he's going to try to get a grant from the state to put it in, but it was going to be put in under union wages at that time. And he said, and anytime you do any development, you'll have to pay us back. Well, that was a short conversation. We didn't go any further than that. I know by state law that a school can improve a street or property up to 450 feet from their boundary without having to go through the state for additional funding. I've been trying to get from the city, the general plan amendment that would show if the general plan amendment was done. And finally, Patrice got that to me today, which I appreciate. You would need to read the two city council meetings. There was nothing in there positive about the school being there, and the city, the first meeting, let's see that, let me just read from this. Today it says, the city council took action 10- well, the number, that the proposed elementary school was not consistent with the general plan. And then at the meeting the next month, the city council reconsidered the item and took an action that the proposed elementary school is consistent with the general plan of the city, conditioned upon Burton School obtaining an easement for the prolongation of Castle Avenue. They never did that. So basically, I'm not sure where this is all at, because Burton School is in a school that's never met all the conditions of the state for approval. So it's a bit of an issue. Since then, the city's general plan has been, the traffic circulation element of the city's general plan shows a lazy S street coming through our property over to Lombardi Street. And then it shows it going south on Lombardi Street to Westfield, but that can't be because Lombardi Street going to Westfield, Neil Ward's house sits there. His Circle Drive and his front yard is out in the street. So it would come down and it would bottleneck right there. So that can't not be a collector street. And unless I misheard at the meeting where you approved the subdivision there, city staff said that it would be a full-width street. It can't be a full-width street, not collector status anyway. The second thing is, the subdivision that we did on Westwood, that would be straight across the street west from where this proposed subdivision would be. When we were doing that, we could not come closer to the canal than 800 feet. And the reason for that, there's some state law. Somebody comes flying over that canal. It's a grade elevation change is what makes the law. You come flying over that canal, and it is raised quite a bit there, and somebody comes over that at 70 miles an hour, and they might not get stopped before they hit a car coming out of a street that comes onto Westwood. Well, we couldn't get closer than Nancy Avenue, or Nancy Street, and yet the subdivision that you approved is like, I think, a couple hundred feet closer north. It can't be. I think it's a state law that you have to keep at least 800 feet away from that kind of a grade change. So someone needs to check that part of it out. The other thing I have concerns with is the environmental impact report. When it came out, I can't believe that anybody from staff could have read that thing. I mean, the first thing I did is look at it and say, wow, they did a traffic survey whenever school was closed. That's interesting. So I responded to that. They had the intersection at Westfield and Lombardi at a B rating, and so they went back in and they amended it and it came out an F, which is I think as bad as you can get. Well, even then, after they amended the environmental impact report, they still showed that the school, the traffic was based on the school having 30% occupancy. It had none. That would add another 180, possible up to 180 cars per day each time the school was bringing kids to school or picking them up. So the intersection is even worse than that. We never had a chance to go back in on the EIR that it's still flawed, and we weren't given a chance to correct that or to make responses to it. The map I gave you shows what Castle Street would look like. I had it drawn just two reasons. One was to see what it would be like to try to develop it when and if we decide to develop it with that street. It's a lot easier to get a lot more lots with straight streets and all. But showing it coming out, coming through our property, coming as close to the school as it could be so that there was not traffic coming off the side streets into the school, and then on to Westwood and to the intersection that exists there, which is Nancy. That's where any street from the subdivision should come to, would be to Nancy. That's the 800 feet away from the canal. We've never been opposed to Castle coming through. It's going to be kind of an issue because our original drawings was 130 lots, and this brings it down to like 100 lots. It does cost you a lot of lots whenever you start doing the curvilineal and all, so we'd need the city to work with us on that. Anyway, bottom line is, there's a lot of angry residents out there. There's 3 different groups that's bundling themselves up. They're raising money and they're doing all these things. Is there some way that we can try to solve this instead of letting this thing go on and Porterville getting a black eye over it? City council should, not the city council maybe, but the city staff back at that time, and it was a different city staff, they should have done something with the school when the school didn't meet the conditions of the state. You know, the city's supplying them sewer and supplying them water, and they didn't have to do that if the school wasn't meeting the conditions of the state. Where would we go from here, from now? If I can't take anything positive back to the people, then I know what the next step is. You know, they're getting recall petitions together, and I'm not threatening you guys. I'm just telling you what it is. Matter of fact, they gave me a list here. If you want it, I can tell you what all they want. Anything you want, I've got copies of it here. But they're getting funds. They're going to litigate it. They're going to do all kinds of things. Let's get this solved some way. If you guys had to live on Lombardy Street, or you had to live on Westfield, or you had to take and go to the intersection of Westwood and Westfield every day, and traffic's backed up 2 or 3 blocks, and on Lombardy from the school, it goes all the way down to Lombardy and around on Westfield, and there's people that, well, they told you in that city council meeting that they'd have to leave an hour early just to drop their kids off. I don't know if you realize, you know, 200, 300, 400 cars sitting there idling for 30, 45 minutes at a time. That's not exactly environmental friendly. And there's been a number of little fender benders out there. People just kind of lose their patience, you know, after a while, and it really needs to be solved. It's, you know, you guys you're elected to protect the city, not protect out-of-town developers. I've been a developer, and I've developed in 19 different cities, and nobody ever protected me like you guys are protecting out-of-town developers, you know. You need to look out for your own citizens first. I realize you probably got a little pressure from the state for housing, but that's a poor excuse for just trotting all over the rights of the people that are here paying taxes. When they can't get in their drive, they can't get out of their drive. It takes them an extra hour and a half per day to drive their kids to and from school. Remember, that's a charter school, kindergarten through the 6th grade. There's a handful, like 25 kids that walk to school. And there's a couple of buses, and I've been counting them, and there's like 20, 25 kids that ride the bus. And the rest of those kids are brought by car because it's a charter school. They bring them from Springville, they bring them from Ducor, they bring them from Lindsay, they bring them all over. I guess my question is the council, do you have any solutions?
I want to thank you for all the comments that you have made this evening.
Huh?
I want to thank you very much for all the comments and the information that you have given us this evening. We are not going to respond until we get into the actual agenda item and discuss it then. And,
Didn't figure you'd make a decision on funding it. or
no,
anything.
no, no, and this is
We
why I'm,
have a solution. Yes, we're glad to meet with the people. Yes, we want to look into it. I'm just asking, is this going to be the last I hear of it, or something going to take place on it?
we'll be discussing it when we get into the agenda item. It will be brought up for discussion because I believe there's something in here that was stated. So that will be discussed during the meeting.
Okay, I'd sure like to be able to tell the people something, but
I understand.
tell them you said thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Please state your name and address for the record.
Angela Dennis, address on file. Good evening. For more than 2 years, I have been requesting that something be done about the pedestrian crossing of the Poplar Ditch on South Indiana Street. The sidewalk does not connect from the Sierra Meadows subdivision to the newly built Royal Oaks project, which forces pedestrians to step into the traffic lane on the bridge. This is the darkest and narrowest section, 26 feet wide, of what now a busy street with 45 miles per hour speed limit. The Royal Oaks project is now occupied with 100 plus homes built and another 250 in the surrounding area, currently in phase 2. The project is supposed to include the only public park space within miles of an area separated from town by 2 freeways. Forcing people to cross the Poplar Ditch using the traffic bridge is dangerous and irresponsible. And as for my stepdaughter, who is permanently wheelchair bound, I can say from a personal experience that access to this area is not at all ADA compliant. In my conversations with the city staff, it has become clear that mistakes were made in not holding the developer responsible for addressing the issue. This is exactly the sort of thing that developer impact fees are meant to be used for, and yet I'm told that a park pedestrian crossing must be approved as a capital improvement budget project. However, after 2 years of inquiry, I still do not see this project even on the list of considerations. I'm here tonight to request as publicly as possible that the construction of an ADA compliant pedestrian bridge over the Poplar Ditch be fast-tracked for approval and funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Do we have any on virtually? Please have them state their name and address for the record.
Yes, Your Honor, we do have someone virtually. I'll go ahead and bring them now.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Randall Morris from Porterville, and I've been a longtime business owner, and I currently work for Porterville Developmental Center. I want to state for the record that, I consider it an honor for Ben Ennis to come out of his busy schedule and come here and make an appearance. I think this project should be handed over to him. I think we need to bring back more of the old-time developers like Ben Ennis, who knows how to get a project going. I think the city council allows projects not to go forward quick enough. Anytime somebody does business with the city of Porterville, they get disgusted because it takes so long to get permits, so long for everything to get done. I want to bring back somebody like Ben Ennis and have him develop and build homes again. He's one heck of a builder, and if it wasn't for him and his family, Porterville would not be Porterville. And there's not even a plaque in this city that recognizes his existence. So I also would like to say we should have a plaque, a wall, or something to honor this man that has put so many homes up and devoted his life to making Porterville a better city. That's all I have for now. It's the first time I've ever spoken at a city council meeting. I do want to state for the record that Ben Ennis, Jerry Ledsinger, people like that need to be honored and thanked for what they've done for our city. And I think put Ben Ennis in charge of it and he will get it done. And that's all I have to say. Randall Morris, and I work for Porterville Developmental Center. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward virtually?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. We will now move into the scheduled matters.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the annual opportunity the council has to review its priority projects, goals, and objectives that it's established for itself. And as part of a presentation that's prepared this evening is to provide a report of the status of those and to engage the council on what its priorities and objectives and goals may be for the coming fiscal year in preparation of the fiscal 22-23 budget, which is very much underway. So have for you this evening, instead of just reading a staff report, put together a presentation to kind of gather all of the information that's provided in the 10-year CIP, as well as all the many different activities and projects of the city, and try to condense it into a presentation. So beginning with, in the first slide, this is the priority projects that the council identified at your meeting last year. And so you identified local street improvements. Council's had an objective to have all its arterials and collectors at a CPI pavement condition index, or PCI, of 70. Also interest in a new community recreation center, improvements at Henry Street Park, wastewater tertiary treatment, new animal shelter facility, an interim and new library facilities, sports complex completion, drought demonstration garden, Westwood Bridge widening over the Tule River, Olive Avenue median drought landscaping, State Route 65 and 190 community welcome signs, skate park, shade structure and lighting, and American Rescue Plan Act funding. I prepared a number of slides ago, and as has always been, about local street improvements, and I'll go through them in a second and begin with that. But thought, and just speak to this introductory slide here, what I don't have slides prepared for, and kind of more just what are the current status of some of these projects. So I'll speak in depth about local street improvements, also about the new community recreation center. On Henry Street Park improvements, we have insurance proceeds that are still from the burn facility that are held for a project. CSET is continuing to do grant-funded work at that location, further property improvements, and so that continues to be an active improvement site. With wastewater tertiary treatment, council's well aware that a satellite plant is under construction right now. It's a $15 million facility in a partnership with the Tule River Tribe, which the city has a 2/3 cost responsibility. Fortunately, received about $2 million in grant funds, courtesy of Senator Hurtado, towards that facility. So that is actively underway. We're, as you're aware, city staff is making improvements to the existing tertiary treatment facility, to the existing wastewater treatment facility for future upgrade to full tertiary treatment status, which will probably be about a $60 million project, which we had issued previously in the year prior, $35 million in water bonds, in large part paid towards that transition, as well as the other water projects. New animal shelter facility, I will speak about that in a little bit more detail in the presentation, as well as interim and new library facilities. Sports complex completion has been a priority, and I'll speak to that as a potential project for council direction in this presentation. Drought demonstration garden, this was one the council said as we were going through COVID last year, this isn't probably the highest and greatest of the projects that we're working on, and something for the council to consider may be to incorporate this, instead of at the site that it's there, perhaps in the new library facility, and we'll perhaps talk about that a little bit. Westwood Bridge widening, this was brought up as a priority, and we've kept it here because it's an ever-changing landscape as it relates to bridges. The Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, which oversees bridges, does not find this bridge to be one that is, they find it to be structurally sound and doesn't carry traffic counts that necessitate its widening. So it is not currently in an active program for any kind of adjustment. That doesn't mean that as further development occurs in the southwest portion of Porterville, that may not be the case with the casino relocation project and things of that nature, but it is not currently there. But we keep it here because we are actively working on planning for 2 additional bridges, which are at Newcomb and at Prospect, and that would allow for development on the south side of the Tule River, as the north side is now nearly built out. And so 2 bridges are part of a planning effort right now that would then connect the city to the airport area on Newcomb. In addition to that, and previously reported to the council, the Olive Street Bridge was being pursued, or is being pursued by the county. It's a county facility for widening. We had tried to make the case for a 4-lane bridge at Olive Avenue and the Tule River, and it was denied by FHWA. They only found it to be that it's too narrow. It needs to be widened, but not to 4 lanes. It doesn't have the traffic counts to do that. The county has approached the city about contributing towards this project, and probably the timeline on this is 5 or 6 years from now, as they're now in the, I would say, kind of the environmental design phase. But they have approached the city about partnering with this as potential development could occur on the west side. In proximity to that, there's 2 Burton schools that have been built in the county in that area, and it could potentially be other residential development in that area, that having a 4-lane bridge may be good planning for the future. The contribution that the county is looking from the city is $5 million, and where that it actually leads to a broader conversation about the entire west entry, I guess you could say, on Olive Avenue. So it's one that I've had with Ted Smalley at TCAG, and looking at certainly would be appropriate use of funds and measure our regional funds, which the city council right now has $45 million over the next 15 years of the measure for use of city projects that have a regional significance. And so that's a potential funding source. And it's not I would really say for direction and for consideration. It's not an up and down vote on that this evening, but certainly want to make you aware of the county's ask for city participation in that project. And again, that would make it a 4-lane bridge as they're doing the widening project. Olive Avenue median drought landscaping, the Henderson Avenue portion of this was complete, and so it's been now reserved to Olive Avenue, and progress has continued to be made upon that. State Route 65 and 190 community welcome signs. There is a roundabout that's going to begin construction in this coming fiscal year. That's what Caltrans has indicated, which will have a Welcome to Porterville element to it, as well as the Mighty 190 artwork and things of that nature, and that's going to be at Westwood and 190. Also, Caltrans, as we were engaging them on how to, on these community welcome signs and the number of different projects that we have in partnership with them right now, said, you know, what we can do, like we did in Visalia, is I love when they just kind of bring this up in a meeting. Oh, you know, we can do something like we did in Visalia at 198, and we can do Welcome to Porterville on the 190, on the north, or I would just say on the south side of the 190 overpass, and we can do something on the Westfield overpass for, you know, as you're coming south. So I know Mr. Ridenauer has been in contact with Caltrans, and we remain in contact with them about it is signage that we would have to pay for, but it is signage that you are entitled to, which is similar to what you saw in the city of Visalia. So if a good example of that is the Visalia welcome signs that they have on 198 as you enter their business park. Skate park shade structure and lighting, that is a project that was approved by council, and bids have been awarded, and project is underway and hopefully will be completed this fiscal year. And then American Rescue Plan Act funding, I have an overview of that and looking for direction from the council consistent with its priorities. So before I begin, I want to provide that broad overview of that. Any questions? Or and I hope that this is a interactive, engaging, this is a presentation of information and status of lots of different projects that are going on in the city. These are the priorities as established by the council, so I'll provide further report of that. All right. So beyond all the priorities, here's the other major things that the city is engaged in. So certainly Eagle Mountain Casino relocation project, a lot of staff time being dedicated to that, as well as members of the council through PATA and casino relocation meetings and a number of other different bodies that are, I'm going to estimate it's going to be a $30 million investment by the city in the relocation project when it's said and done, between the wastewater treatment facility, storm drain improvements, and other local road improvements associated with the project. The East Porterville Water Connection Project is still, we incrementally made progress this month when the second well of the 3 that were promised by the state came online. Is that fair, Mike? Is it online now? All right, so we passed all our water stuff, so the church well, as you will know it as, is now online, and so that promise of that 3rd well, we call it the Aiken well, is still a little bit of a gleam in the eye. I would say that's probably still another 2 years away from the state satisfying its commitments to the city for having done that project. SART recommendations implementation, as the council is aware, there's approximately 90 recommendations that was contained in the serious accident review team recommendations, and I'll speak a little bit to some of those recommendations, but this is something the fire department certainly takes very seriously, and I know that Acting Chief Cogburn were here would speak, and I know that Acting Deputy Chief Skiles here would speak that this is something very, obviously very important to them and something they're very diligently working towards. Deficient water systems connection, there's a number of water systems around the city of Porterville that the state and those residents are asking for you to connect to them because their wells are either failing or are nitrated. In fact, Hope School is seeking your assistance right now because their water is undrinkable, so they need drinking water. Right now they're on a bottled water system, and so the state, in partnership with Self-Help, is coming and going to be asking you to please run a water line a mile out to them so that they can be connected to your water system. Something that's taking a lot of Mr. Knight's time right now and dealing with the, I don't know, Mike, 6 deficient water systems around us?
Yeah, there's also some additional conversations with a boundary amendment to be able to encompass more. That would extend further south of the city limit to provide safe and good quality drinking water for residents.
So, certainly having taken a heavy load off of the county and the state with the East Portable Water Project and the surrounding water connections, following that up with annexation sewer mains, which obviously all these homes that were annexed, developed in the county were on septic tanks, which now state regulations are ramping up on nitrification, which certainly sewer, and in fact there's a fairly significant pressure being applied by the state on the city to connect all of the septic systems because of their nitrification of groundwater, which groundwater has become a very important element, obviously, through SGMA. So you have, again, another $14 million being expended right now in 5 or 6 different districts that are being extending sewer and for folks to connect to if they wish to connect. But at least those sewer mains are being extended out to them over the next several months. Tule River Parkway Phase 3 construction. This is the next 3rd segment of the Tule River Parkway, and finally received all of our, I think we finally got from the flood folks their permit to go ahead and begin construction on the 3rd leg of the Tule River Parkway. Butterfield Stage Corridor and Santa Fe Byway. These are Butterfield Stage Corridor on the former Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. Received an $8 million grant for development of this corridor into a very high-quality bike and pedestrian trail. And then Santa Fe Byway is a working title for the Rails to Trails and really how to make that a very robust and active and safe, encouraging, well-lit, and security and things of that nature to encourage folks to use that. And I'll speak a little bit about that as it connects to other city projects. The Heritage Mini Pitch Sports Complex is with the sale of the Heritage Center in process. This would be the reinvestment of those funds into a number of different mini pitches that would allow for different activities, arena, soccer, basketball, pickleball, things of that nature, things that have been asked by your community to provide those opportunities for. Navigation Center and Homeless Solutions, certainly looking at with dollars that are available to address homelessness and provides for expansion opportunities, looking at how the Navigation Center can be expanded. Right now, you're the only city providing 15 emergency shelter beds and 15 permanent supportive housing beds in our county. There is 2 projects that are under construction now under project Home Key, which are, one is at 99 Palms, and the other is, I think it's called Sequoia. I've lost the name of it, Sequoia Apartments, I believe. It's on Mooney Boulevard in Visalia. Anyway, those are to be permanent supportive housing. I'm sorry, I use the term permanent supportive housing. It is actually transitional housing. That's what you're doing at the Navigation Center. And the ability to relocate other former portable classrooms and upfit them with the necessary fire suppression systems and make them into living quarters are active conversations that are going on right now. Unfortunately, the county, which received a lot of funds, apparently doesn't have any for capital expenditures. So you're kind of on your own if you're going to make further improvements, apparently. And then airport runway relocation, I would say that's another one, and that has some connection to one of the street projects that's going to be before you, and that is looking at the realignment of West and what's now Worth from Westwood to account for the relocation of the Porterville runway and extending it. Before we move on, any questions about any of those?
Council have any questions?
And these are not priorities. These are just other major work efforts
No
that
questions.
are underway. Okay. So we'll delve into roads. So under authorized projects, so this is the list of roads that and the different that have been authorized by council and appropriated for either reconstruction or rehabilitation. It's a $37 million work program. A significant part of that was taken off last year. You might remember it was $50 million last year, and that was Henderson Avenue, which is those two segments are complete, and now the final accounting is being completed. So removing Henderson Avenue from this, you have a $37 million work program, the largest of this, and this is just the pavement part. And I'll get into each of these projects in some greater depth, but this is just the pavement portion of this. So Morton from Westwood to Plano, as an example, is an $11 million just in pavement. So we'll talk about the supporting infrastructure for it. But Morton Avenue, Westwood to Plano is $11 million. And you see that in kind of descending order. Villa, Maine, which includes a parking lot as well. We're looking at the improvement of the former JCPenney building into a parking lot in support of downtown. Dayton Kessing improvements in the vicinity of J Street, Bridge, Westwood, Newcomb. So these are all, none of these should be a surprise to you. These have been the projects that you have given direction to and for us to begin progress on. So now we'll delve into, dealing with biggest numbers first. So in this next fiscal year, 22-23, it's a $13.3 million project. I'm sorry, this is here's what it looked like to be projects for 22-23 coming up. So out of that 39 million, here is 13 million of it anticipated to go to construction this next year. So Villa between Olive and Henderson is approximate $4 million. And again, this is just the pavement portion. $4 million on Villa, $2.9 million on Newcomb, $2.9 million on Henderson, 1.1 on Grand, 1.1 on Maine, Montgomery, and Plano. And I actually want to talk about Plano just for a second. This was a priority of the or appropriated by the council as a completion of the Plano when we did the rehabilitation of Plano Street. And this gets into Caltrans right away. So our project limits when we did the rehabilitation was to the city street length, not into the Caltrans right away. But we had earmarked funds, and Caltrans had said, hey, if you're so willing, we can let you go into here. And it was about $500,000 to complete the rehabilitation of Plano. And the timeline kind of moves around from Caltrans when the roundabout at Plano and 190 is going to be. So I'd say from staff's perspective, in this $500,000, it might have better utility in other parts of the city on your streets than on Caltrans streets, and something that they're kind of moving around in a timeline when that roundabout might be the case. So I want to remember that $500,000 when I come to a project here. Right now, that's programmed out of LTF. This is a look ahead beyond 22-23, what's anticipated to be the construction schedules in 23-24 and 24-25 of those priorities. So, so not this coming fiscal year, but the one following would be about $10 million in street projects. Date, which would be J and H in Kessing. Main would be the second phase of Main and the parking lot. Morton, you'll now see Morton Avenue's reconstruction begin to pop up, and this proposes to begin moving east to west. Westwood from Henderson, that's a project that has been appropriated by council, and this is between Henderson and Westfield. Villa, between Henderson and Westfield, that's an extension of what you're already doing right now up to Henderson in this next fiscal year. And then the Henry Street, which is following back and improving the street and curb gutter and sidewalks in front of the Henry Street property, or Murray Park extension. And then 24-25, $4.6 million, and this kind of completes those roads that, or I would say continues to make progress on them. Union Avenue, looking at going to construction at $1.7 million. Morton, another segment of Morton at $1.6 million. The Slough Bridge at Westwood and Henderson, essentially, by CVS, would be $1 million. And then in the third phase of the Main Street reconstruction would be the intersections being with decorative asphalt in the different intersections on Main Street. Any questions about work plan schedules between next fiscal year and the succeeding two?
Any questions? No.
Is there a timeline on Main Street?
I'm sorry?
Is there a timeline on Main Street and a projection?
Yeah, I have one that actually will go through all that.
Okay.
So begin with Morton Avenue. That's the biggest project on street project. Right now, it's estimated about $17 million. Over this next year, in the following fiscal year, will be the design. The water cost. So as every segment of street is being done, there's four different pipelines being installed at the same time. So water, sewer, storm drain, and recycled water purple pipe. Morton Avenue is going to be the major carrier of recycled water across the community, leading from the wastewater treatment facility. So the water number you see there is combination of recycled water and water. So the entire, it's about $4 million to put purple pipe and domestic water, potable water, down Morton Avenue for the entire. And you'll see the project timeline there. It's anticipated to be about a 6-year project, depending on if how certain things can be addressed. So remember the $500,000 I told you about from 190 and Plano. This is one, given this schedule, in talking with staff, that $500,000 may be better appropriated to city staff going and doing a hot mix overlay over the worst parts of Morton, especially that are more typically on the west end. There were former county areas that, I mean, you can follow what was in the county by the condition of the street. So it would be staff's suggestion. It's about $500,000, and if we're going to put $500,000 to do street improvements, better to do it on city streets than on what is Caltrans Street. So as a suggestion would be to take that money and reprogram it into Morton Avenue. And Mike, you want to speak maybe about the particular sections of that?
Yeah, so we've done some evaluation in anticipating the potential of going into to repair some areas and prolong some of the conditions as the project moves that direction. So we've looked at it's about 1.4 miles of street that we think we can address with that $500,000, and we focused in the area of Matthew to Highway 65, and then progressing to the area of E Street and D Street. So working in between those two sections are really some of the higher priority areas, some lower conditions, a lot of alligator cracking in there, and we've done our best effort to do pothole repair, but it just seems to keep breaking out. So to make best use of this and to prolong and have a better driving condition on Morton Avenue, it would be a great opportunity to be able to direct some of those funds and make those interim repairs That is our highest level of complaint as far as potholes go. There's a significant amount that come in. I think we're aware of it as it happens, quite honestly. But that would be a great opportunity to get in there and address some of those areas.
And what that would provide is essentially a Band-Aid over this while you're getting ready to reconstruct it and the entire road. And so, you know, we don't like throwaways. And so that might be $500,000 well spent in improving those areas and at least getting another 5 or 6 years of good road out of it, I guess I would say, as opposed to what it is currently while it's awaiting reconstruction. The other part is that we're engaged with Southern California Edison. There'll be an item that comes back to the council for approval on the undergrounding of utilities between, we brought an item to the council between Roach and Morton Avenue. It's in your staff report. That's a standalone project and one that, you know, we have a, you know, once the road's done, you don't get to cut it for 5 years kinds of thing. So we also have to sequence with them. They're about 3 years away from doing their undergrounding project between Roach and Main Street. So we'll also keep that in mind while we're looking at design and segmenting of construction of different segments of Morton Avenue. Any questions about Morton?
Any questions?
This is a
Please.
big one. This is
Please.
$17 million over about 5 or 6 years.
Go ahead.
My question was, Mr. Knight, what was the length of the road that you said would be for the Morton section?
So we evaluate about 1.4 miles
Okay,
through there.
thank you.
Thank you.
On to Villa Street. This is another big project, about an $8 million project. In this next year, environmental and right-of-way are appropriate, or have been appropriated by the council, and design. We have utility relocation that needs to occur, about $100,000. It's $4 million in city utilities. This is, again, all of the things. This is water, sewer, storm drain, recycled water. That would be all part of this project. Then with a construction cost of about $3.6 million, which includes the new box culvert that would be on Villa as well. And so this is one of the projects anticipated to go to construction this next fiscal year. Newcomb Street reconstruction. This is one that we had hoped would already been under construction, but we've been delayed by Edison in the streetlights because that's an important part of the construction in this, is because this is a former county area, didn't have streetlights, and in including that, you're doing curb gutter and sidewalk streetlights in the connecting piece from Putnam, from West Putnam School, that's connecting as part of this with your Measure I dollars. You allocated $400,000 to do curb gutter and sidewalk and streetlights on part of Putnam Avenue. Actually, it's on two sides. It's Putnam and, help me, Javier. Toma, yeah. So actually, both sides of that school will have connecting curb gutter streetlights, and just Edison's behind on their estimates or the cost estimates. We have this ready to bid. You've already advertised, you know, so now we're just waiting on Edison to provide this. So city, there's a lot of utility costs. Again, this will be a major segment of this that will include water, sewer, recycled water, $3.4 million just in the utilities, and then the road construction parts of it is about $3 million. And that would be, we believe that to be under reconstruction this fiscal year. You'll see right now the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant that the city received. It was a 50% grant to improve the intersection at Olive Avenue and Newcomb is already underway right now, making the necessary ADA improvements. That was a county area that's being brought up to standard. Henderson Avenue rehabilitation. This would be picking up where the rehabilitation, I think it's at Patsy, and this would continue down to Westwood. It's a almost $4.3 million project. It has almost 1.4 primarily for tertiary treated water for purple pipe to be installed. So one of the challenges is with the objectives of the city's master plan for tertiary treatment is to get the schools' irrigation systems off of the potable water system and city parks. So one of the challenges is how to get across the slough. Well, using one of the there's a way to avoid the slough area and all the environmental stuff as part of this. So we're looking at putting purple pipe into Henderson Avenue here so that ultimately we can get out to the Burton schools that are in the area. Construction of that is $2.9 million. So it's a $4.3 million project. Main Street reconstruction, this goes to the council members' question. So is under design. Right now, the storm drain, the necessary storm drain improvements are being done. Will probably be finished in the first part of the next fiscal year and see the first segment of reconstruction begin between Morton and Putnam. Estimated cost is $1 million in this coming fiscal year. And then the second phase of Putnam to Olive at $1 million for 23-24, as well as the parking lot improvement. And I call it a parking lot. Really, we're just going to build a big concrete box and then whatever you put on top of it. So that's $1 million, which we're going through environmental review for right now. And then as I shared, the fourth phase out there in 24-25 is to come back and do the intersections inside the brick crosswalks and do decorative concrete or decorative asphalt with that. So, council member, does that help answer your question? That provides you with that. Can you go back, Patrice?
Thank you.
All right, next, okay. Date Avenue and Kessing, this has been one of those, just kind of a mess to undo, which has been the Date, former county area, J Street Bridge, and the council's aware of all the, you got a house constructed in the middle of the street there. So doing the right-of-way acquisition is acquisition of a house, and design is nearly complete. Kessing would be pushed through. We have a very, Mike, you could do a better job. So there's a private road. It's not a city road. It's a private road that requires refuse drivers and fire to access, and they have no way to turn around. So it's providing the Kessing outlet is what's proposed to be done, and then what is the part of the construction costs of that area there. Union Avenue reconstruction, it's about a $2.5 million project. It's under design. There's another house that needs to be purchased that was built in the right-of-way. So we have a 345, you love buying homes. Utilities relocation needs to occur. It's about a $300,000. This is for Edison and the other utilities. City utilities, there would be new water meters put in at $100,000 on the street. And construction costs, curb, gutter, sidewalk, street lights are $1.725 million. Grand Avenue reconstruction at $1.3 million. This is going to be the area actually between I'm going to say Henrahan to Plano, connecting. So you have the U.S. Forest Service that's building its new facility in the rail and the Rails to Trails or Santa Fe Byway, however we want to talk about it. So Grand Avenue comes up and connects with Hanrahan. Plus there's crossing over the trail being designed as well. So there's city utilities of $200,000 and construction of $1.1 million, and this is on Grand itself, next to Chiapa Welding, if you're familiar with where that's at. Microsurfacing projects. So as we reconstruct streets, we keep time with when they were improved, and then in about a 5-year time frame, come back and put a heavy-duty slurry seal on the top of it, so it preserves that road for a longer time. So it's proposed of microsurfacing projects this next year of about $2.75 million. West North Grand, if time goes by, it's time to, it seems like we just reconstructed that road, but now it's time to put the treatment back on top of it. And that's about $1 million to do that from Rose Street up to North Main Street across 65. Henderson Avenue between J and 2nd, this was a piece that was reconstructed, and this would be have a microsurface overlay on it. Maine from Date to College, Date from Maine to Plano, Matthew from Westfield to Castle, Vandalia from Indiana to Jay, Date Plano to Park, and Plano Westfield, and then to the city limits to the north. So this is a recommended, we put this in here because this is not something that city staff does. This would be under contract to have them come, and this is what's proposed, is $2.75 million. Usually this has been your Measure R local funds that has funded this, which is the preservations of city streets. You receive about $1 million a year of that. If TCAG has done a financing of bonds, which they would be more than happy to advance Measure R monies to the city. They're looking for places for money to go. So the city could take up to additional $2 million of its Measure R. We also have some that we're still working in programming. So we feel we can, with this recommendation, have these streets be microsurfaced. And this would be just a matter of protecting them after they've been reconstructed. So there are new projects, and much of these are project-oriented. So you have Teapot Dome, State Route 65 to West Street. This is in support of the Eagle Mountain relocation project. It's an $8 million, it'd be a reconstruction of Teapot Dome from 65 to West Street. This would be funded through Measure R regional funds. This would be considered a regionally significant thoroughfare, and funds that are available to the council for those improvements. Similarly, the West Worth realignment. And so this is one to deal with the traffic circulation from the casino, but also in recognition of the airport runway relocation. It's a $2.76 million project that would create a new roadway connecting west and what we're called the Worth alignment that would tie into Westwood. And we believe that with this, as we begin through the grant cycle with the Federal FAA, that this contribution would be significantly recognized, and we believe to be matching dollars from the federal government for further road improvements in that area. So what may be the interim would not be the ultimate as part of the runway project would be dollars to further build out the road infrastructure in that area. But this would be, and again, this would be Measure R regional funds, not city funds dedicated to it. Putnam, Elderwood to Westwood, this is a $1.1 million grant. Half of the money, it's a $1.1 million project. Half of the money has been based on a grant from TCAG through the ATP program, which would be the curb gutter, sidewalk, street lights on Putnam and on Elderwood that would connect then Putnam and Toma. Did I get that right? I think it's Toma. Toma and Putnam would be then connected through Elderwood. Curb gutter, street light. We have a really odd right-of-way situation here, where when it was developed in the county, the right-of-way on Elderwood has right-of-way, but if it's ever improved, the right-of-way reverts and you have to buy it back. Our right-of-way folks have said, I've never seen conditions like this in a right-of-way where you have the right-of-way that's dedicated, but if it's ever improved, curb gutter, sidewalk, you lose the right-of-way and you have to reacquire the right-of-way. So in any event, there'll probably be, I think we programmed $400,000 for right-of-way acquisition along Elderwood for that project. And then 4th Street, this comes up because of the grant that was received, and I'll speak to that here in a little bit, for the new gymnasium on 4th Street at Grand and Henderson, making improvements along Grand on 4th Street between Grand and Henderson, and really improve that as that facility would become a reality. And and again, these are just proposed projects at $1,060,000. And then council members Stowe and Reyes brought up Castle between Lombardi and Matthew, which from a construction cost has a $1.55 million estimate attached to it. So these are not streets in your current work program. They are for the council's consideration. 2 of them are funded significantly by Measure R, regional funds. Putnam is half grant, and then 4th Street would be essentially a new project because of the associated city project with it. And then Castle is included here at the request of the council members.
Please.
With the figure on Castle, how does that look? I know we've heard comment about and a map submitted, but does that figure match a certain length, distance?
I'm going to ask Mr. Javier Sanchez to ask that question. He provided it. I've not been involved.
Yeah, to address that question, what I accounted for was curb and gutter, a 40-foot wide street to match, or from curb face to curb face, to match what's out there on, from Lombardi to the end of Castle. Sidewalk on both sides, landscaping to comply with our new standard of parkways there. Block wall on one side, in case there was a need for screening, and leaving the other side for a development project, and then including water, sewer, potentially a recycled water main in there as well, and some drainage pipe. So it comes out to about $1,000 a foot based on this width of street.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
All right, so that kind of ends streets. Is there anything further you'd like to talk about? And what this does not include is the self-performed work that city crews do. There'll be significant work they do. And again, we already talked about $500,000 that is recommended to be done as a hot mix overlay over Morton Avenue. But we have all of the sewer annexation projects, which after the streets are torn up and the sewer put in, our crews come back behind and do a cold mix overlay. In addition to that, we have a number of streets that are identified for, and these are local streets. These aren't your arterials or collectors. This is the one case where they actually have done some really good job with hot mix. A couple of good examples of that is on South Main Street right now. If you drive that, as is all city crews that did that work between Olive Avenue and can't remember how far in Orange. And they've also done work on Teapot Dome between 65 and I think Newcomb. And we have additional work that we need to do on Teapot Dome as part of the MOU with the tribe on improvements. So this was a new endeavor of the city to invest in its own equipment and self-perform some of its work, and I think they've done a great job, and appreciate the streets folks. So you're basically going every day. During the summer, you're going with hot mix, and during the winter, you're going with cold mix, and looking at what are the best treatments for those different local streets. So again, that's part of your regular budgetary process of funding that you allocate, and we bring the streets that are recommended for that in July after you appropriate the budget, and you approve that. So, and again, those are just generally local streets. All right, so transitioning from streets into other projects of significance, and especially to those that are the priority of the council. About a $60 million work program before us. So a new library facility, you'll see it contained in the CIP for $32.5 million. There, with council's direction, there's negotiations underway for property acquisition and continued engagement with our insurance carrier on fire insurance proceeds. Staff has applied for a $10 million grant that's currently available, which we have I'd say a high level of confidence. It's not 100%, but we do feel like certainly the circumstances involving the needing a new library, as well as you have to be able to put up half the, well, at least dollar for dollar, or at least half the money for a new facility. Most applications, we believe, are for upgrades or modernization or those types of things. Not many of them, because of the match requirements, are going after new facilities, which we have applied for. The max is 10 million. We've received letters of support for that from both Senator Hurtado and Assemblymember Mathis for that, and appreciate their support on that. And they both have been checking in to see if there's any status on that. We should know this summer what the result is of that grant opportunity, as well as that there are business entities and other individuals that have inquired about coming on as partners in that new facility, and how they could be donors in it, or be part of a contributors to that over a number of years. So yeah, it's a big number. This is based on the needs assessment that was done that spoke to a 40,000 square foot building. And so this is I would say this is at the high end, but we'd rather be high than tell you 22 million and miss it by 3 million. So the more likely cost is probably around 25, but for all intents and purposes, we're working at 32 and a half. New community gym at $11 million. The city was successful in receiving an almost $8 million grant for under Prop 68 towards that. As a successor to that, given its location along the rails to trails, or the Santa Fe Byway as we call it, Mr. Bidenauer's staff was successful in receiving another grant for Clean California that will, so the facility we were looking at, or project, was about $12 million, and it included outdoor activity areas. And then with Mr. Bidenauer's staff's great work in getting another $3.6 million of grant funds, can help address some of those outdoor activity areas that were part of this grant, so that the thrust of the $8 million can be in the facility. You also have at your disposal Measure R alternative transportation funds, which the council is aware you have 20 million that's been allocated to you. I would tell you, if Mr. Smalley were here, he would say, you just give me a project and I'll figure out the funding for you. And this is, again, restricted to just alternative, like bike and ped types of programs. So I think the realities of being able to fund this, and I have a slide here in a bit that I'll talk about this somewhat. Animal shelter facilities, similarly, we're working at a $7.5 million cost. I would say this is one of the biggest priorities for staff, given that the existing shelter is one, outdoor facilities are not how you do animal shelter anymore. There are indoor facilities, helps with disease control and things of that nature. And then that facility is just old and not how it's done. And it's ineffective and inefficient, as folks are having to drive, 20 minutes each direction, and it doesn't serve it served its purpose at the time when the city wasn't in the animal control business, and Lindsay was, until they got themselves upside down. So it served its purpose, and so I have some recommendations as it regards to the $7.5 million. Part of that is Measure R, again, because of its location next to the Butterfield Stage Corridor, as we call it. So there's a dog park that's part of that, which, with it being open to the public, is considered an amenity under the definition of alternative transportation, and could be funded by, in conjunction with the grant that we received for the development of the trail system. There's also some street funds that are in that number as well, because there's a frontage improvements that come along with that. Fire station improvements, and this gets to SART recommendations. So with additional personnel comes a need for additional space for them to have rest areas, as well as the equipment for it to reside in. And so each of our three stations are being currently under review and designed for improvements that would include additional staff quarters, as well as the engines of today are not what was developed 20 years ago, and even 10 years ago. The equipment is taller, longer, wider, and the bays, everybody's going to have to evaluate this because the equipment is just, it's much more advanced, and it's bigger. So the bay doors are going to have to be widened, heightened, and lengthened. So we've associated a number here of 2.65 million for fire station improvements, and this is directly tied to the SART, which talked about additional personnel on shift to meet the demands of a large-scale commercial fire. Mini pitch sports complex, I've spoken to that in the reinvestment of funds from the sale of the Heritage Center at 1.7 million. Fire training facility, $1 million of this is associated with a prop. So nowhere in Tulare County is there a commercial fire training experience. You have to go out of county for that. And one of the recommendations of the SART was that be somewhere in Tulare County, there needs to be a commercial fire. All the training that happens today in Tulare County is residential. There is no training locally in Tulare County for commercial fire. So you have to go to Fresno or Kern County for that. So this would provide, with that $1 million, a prop that would be purchased and constructed at the fire training facility that would be a regional training facility for the entire county. You would have, as the case with any major, as you just saw not too long ago, we sent crews to Exeter when they had the commercial structure fire there. So everybody will come, as we saw in our tragic case. So having that facility that folks can come to and train and be prepared for commercial fire is recommended. And again, that's in line with the SART recommendations. Lighted baseball field. This was one of the priorities of the council from last year, and it's got $1 million price tag to it. And I would say it's staff's right. We're kind of moving it around, so to speak, on the game board between out by the mini pitches or out at the sports complex. I would say from a space and probably the sports complex is the best location for it. You know, what's unfortunate about this is that when the city received, back in it was almost $700,000 to redo a lighted baseball field, that wasn't what the community asked for, and that's not what the school districts asked you. They asked you to build lit football fields because the football field, so the school fields were getting beat up by the tackle football folks, and then your chambers got packed with youth football folks as well, and so those funds went to light 2 football fields that are now not used by football because they're back at each of the high schools have started their own junior programs to develop their football programs in high school. So in the end, you know, at the community's request and the school's request, invested in something that isn't being used to its highest and best use. And so have a suggestion in regards to that. And then Hayesfield lighting. So this is, if you were out at Hayesfield, you would see lights that are on top of wood poles, which are not a good combination with a storm drain basin. And so it's time to replace, we actually had a pole fall down due to erosion or deterioration of the wood, and so it's time to fix that. And that has about a $750,000 price tag attached to it. All right, so back to, you know, these are the big rocks in the jar as it relates to city facilities. Any questions that you have?
Here's
on
the question.
that? Okay.
John, on this public facilities, I just happened to be out hitting on the golf course the other day. And speaking of poles, the netting poles are leaning and about to fall, and the netting is just ragged. So it's really a safety hazard, and I just feel one of those poles is going to come down because it's leaning terribly. I don't know if anybody reported it to Donnie or not, but
It's in the CIP for replacement, just not in this year. I think it's a couple years out in, Don.
I don't know if it's going to last 2 years, to tell you the truth, but from what I've seen, I just don't know. But if you're aware of it, then I'm sure.
Well, I mean, this is the time to talk about these things.
Okay. Anything else to that? Okay. No. Did you have any questions? No.
No, but just you know, we're contacted about issues that have to deal with the nets and the poles at times at the golf course, and I think your powers of observation in that realm, I think, probably outweigh mine with how the net should be, and so I don't object to looking at that.
We can bring some estimates back on that. It's already in there, actually. Donnie, what's the, I got it.
Trying to see what year we put that in. We can get some updated numbers as well. That was something that we started looking at when we were looking at possibly raising the netting along Leggett, you know, on number 3. So we've been looking at that in the past as well as number 7. We have a couple. There's one vendor that was able to go up that high and put that in. So we can look at that some more. I'm trying to see what.
So in the CIP, so 2 years out, so in 24, 25, there's perimeter netting on Leggett Street at 200 and, my eyesight's failing me, 215,000. Perimeter netting the following year on Park Drive at 170,000, and then the driving range poles in 26, 27 at 200,000. So you bought $600,000.
Okay. That answer your question?
Yes, that was the
Okay, thank you.
So in multimodal projects, and this gets into your ATP things, proposed projects is 24.4 million. Butterfield Stage Corridor, again, Luisa Zavala, she wonders when her commissions are going to be for each grant. I think she's up to 12 million now, so she's wondering what her commission is on those grants. She's done a wonderful job, and we're fortunate that it was unfortunate to lose her as the the deputy city clerk, but she is doing the city well in her new capacities, and we're fortunate to work with Fernando now too. So Butterfield Stage Corridor at 8.1 million. That's a grant-funded position, grant-funded. So one that we're actively under environmental and design on right now, with construction hopefully in the next year or two. Tule River Bridge, it's a standalone, so the grant did not include the bridge over the Tule purposefully, because you would have been tied up for forever in environmental with the funding sources. So looking to have this as a locally funded project. It's got a big price tag for a pedestrian bike and ped bridge, but that's what bridges are going for these days, even at bike and ped at 3.75 million. This would be a Measure R alternative transportation funded project. Santa Fe Byway, again, Rails to Trails. This was a 3.6 million that was, again, Luisa was successful in securing, and Jason in his shop. And so this will get to the lighting and other amenities along the Rails to Trails corridor. Veterans Park Trail parking lot and restroom, again, Measure R funded. We're probably going to have to spend a couple $100,000 in playground equipment, because I don't know that the CCAG Board of Directors is going to go along with playground equipment as an amenity to a bike trail. But so we might have to come up with that ourselves. But certainly the trail, so you see Veterans Park Trail 2 at 1.8 million. That's a grant funded through a federal grant, CMAQ grant, which is coming up. And then companion with that would be to do a new parking lot on the Morton side, as well as a restroom facility, permanent restroom facility, and playground at 2.4 million. Tule River Parkway Phase 3, as I shared with you, will go to construction this year at almost $2 million. Tule River Parkway lighting, so along the parkway, adding lighting to that at 1.63 million, again, and Rails to Trail lighting, which in large part is being picked up by the Santa Fe Byway. But you have these funds that are available to, and again, these are all Measure R funds that you have at your disposal. I would tell you right now, Ted would say, if you need $10 million of Measure R for this, this is your funding source for that. So, any questions about bike and ped?
Any questions?
All right, moving on to ARPA, this was also one of the council's priorities. Almost $20 million received by the city. It's going to be received in 2 tranches. The first has been received of about $10 million. When the funds were first received, the council's priorities was water infrastructure, homeless services, broadband and technology infrastructure, business assistance, and vaccine support. And subsequent to that has been additional, and that was based on the preliminary rulings, as they called it. They've now come out with final rules and actually made some additional flexibility for that. When the council deliberated this back last year in May of 2021, at that time it was under the interim rule, and it was pretty confining. And this was generally consistent with that. That said, here's the things that you can use it for. Subsequent to that, and I guess if you can roll the, they've now separated into restricted and unrestricted revenue. So out of the 20 million, there is, and I'm going to work backwards from this. So I'm going to begin with the restricted. So any expenditure of ARPA funds that the city has done has come out of what is considered the restricted side, not the unrestricted side. So the restricted side says remember there was the interim rule, and it said, here's what you can use the money for, here's what you can't use the money for. Well, so we've been focusing on that, and so to date, out of what's called the restricted revenue, out of the almost 10 million, we've spent $3,019. Maria, is that, it might be $18.73, but Maria knows where every penny is. 1.8 million was in the vaccine incentive, which was supporting local businesses and also in encouraging local folks to be vaccinated. Employee testing and quarantine, it was almost $500,000. So between all of the testing that we've been doing with employees and quarantining and things of that nature, we're able to claim as a reimbursement against these funds for time lost, employee time, is almost $500,000. Premium pay for public safety was $434,000 for the fire department and police department for eligible individuals. $250,000 went to Finca Serena in their ask for permanent supportive housing project that's currently under construction. So a balance available in the restricted, and again, this goes to, you can only use it for those express purposes, is about $7 million. There is legislation, and you may be getting the same updates I am, where they're trying to make that, so there's what's called the unrestricted side. This is the restricted side, which is your unrestricted can be no more than 10 million. There's legislation that's been introduced and is working its way through Congress right now, which could make all of it unrestricted. I don't know how that's going to settle itself out. One of the problems with the interim rule, or with the rules, and Maria can attest to this, is that many of the things that we were looking to do with technology are not eligible. And they, because the way they wrote the rules under broadband just made it, Porterville's too big of a city and has too much accessible services to be able to thread the needle on that. I guess here's the dilemma I guess you have, is that you have $7 million of restricted funds that can be only used for express purpose, which generally your priorities have been defined as. And you've spent $3 million of that. And you have to spend it, you have to obligate it by December of '24. So you're not under a shot clock. I'm not telling you got to spend it and, but you do have to have it obligated. So that means contracts in place, under construction kinds of activities. So you have $7 million essentially available to you to do those that are restricted to as you have been doing. So your balance carrying forward is $7 million right now, essentially, and however you wish to spend it. So now I'm talking about the unrestricted revenue. So that's, like I said, under the final rule was $10 million. So it's they call it general revenue, general business, general governmental operation support. So you can't, and you need to, you can start new programs, but it has, you can't, how do I say this? Got to be careful. I mean, this isn't just do whatever you want. It is make sure it's for a general governmental purpose. And your auditor is who would tell you what your general governmental purpose would be. So these are all well within what are considered general governmental purposes. And given that these are one-time funds with facilities, for the animal shelter facility, staff's proposed $5 million be allocated to the animal shelter facility. That would, should be able to pay for at least the base bid and probably some of those alternatives when this was initially bid by the council. In the new community gym, $3.2 million to augment the grant that was received. That would fully fund that project, we would hope. The lighted baseball field at $1 million and Hayesfield at $750,000. So it does leave you with a couple $100,000 maybe for golf course poles. I don't know. It's, but as Maria would say, that's a really fast way to spend $10 million. Which kind of gets, you know, I want to speak, it really gets to the city's, you know, very fiscal conservative nature. Here's just a general fund reserve fund. So right now you're at $10.5 million. You have you budget $32 million for your general fund, and in the general fund reserve fund you have $10.5 million. So that's a pretty good save ratio to that. Under your policy, you have budget stabilization fund, which is 15% of budgeted expenditures, which is about $4.7 million on reserve. Your catastrophic emergency fund is 10%, which puts it just over 3.1. And this is where we have some conversations, to be candid, about is that the best use of funds? And I've asked this of fire chiefs in the past. I said, you know, I could tell, so tell me how much money there should be in the catastrophic emergency fund. And they said, well, tell me the emergency. And then I'll tell you how much money, if that's good or not. Generally speaking, if it's really bad, there's going to be lots of other financial support. As you saw, for example, with the library fire. I mean, you have insurance, and if it was an earthquake that put half of Main Street because of the unreinforced brick buildings, there'd be significant federal and state assistance that you wouldn't be carrying that yourself. So this becomes one of the conversations we have internally, and it certainly can be revisited by the council. You're already going to be reviewing your reserve policy as part of a pension funding policy as part of your reserve policy, because staff's going to be recommending at the recommendation of the internal audit committee that you establish within this here a pension stabilization fund where monies would be as savings are accomplished by paying down the pension, what's called the unfunded part of the pension, that if there are savings that come, they get invested in the pension. And I'll spend more time talking about the intricacies of that policy. But it does lead to one of those questions of, you know, does the council revisit its emergency catastrophic fund and say it's going to be $1 million? It's just going to be $1 million fund, and that would, in essence, provide an additional $2.1 million for projects, if you feel so inclined. You've kept it funded, but you know, it's one of those. We went through a pretty bad emergency 2 years ago, and the fund is still there for that. And then you also have we call these kind of the fountains. So once those are fully funded, that 25%. Then they come into these other funds. So right now on account, as of this evening, you have in your facility deferred maintenance account almost $1 million, in your infrastructure improvement almost $1 million, and capital improvement $864. Several budgetary considerations. The City Council expressed its interest in evaluating its park impact fee, and you know, kind of the you know, where it is in relation to other communities, as well as the policies. I mean, there are communities that do not count trails as parks. They put in their trails and they do pay towards parks. So, and Visalia is a good example of that. A trail is not considered to be even though it is, the policy of the city of Visalia is that you do a trail and you pay impact fees towards parks. And then we are also currently undergoing a refuse rate study. That is the one fund of the city that is upside down. You are in the red because of, quite frankly, because of recycling, the world of recycling, which went from paying you $500,000 a year to recycle, paying you $500,000 to now you paying $500,000 to have your recycling done. That's $1 million. That's $1 million switch, and it's one that's caused everybody to go in the red. And so there's a refuse rate study that'll be coming to council, a sewer and storm drain rate study, as well as a water rate study, and then, like I said, a pension funding policy or bond issue. That'll be, but again, that's not up for tonight. That's really more just foreshadowing future, here we are on April 12th and making you aware of what's coming up in June. And with that, happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, council, we've been provided with an abundance of information this evening to this regard, and we've heard under oral communications as well.
Could I make one addendum when I was talking about the budget? Because it's not a capital, so we don't talk about people. But I did.
I understand.
I did want to say when I was doing the ARPA in the restricted, and I was talking about this with Mr. Ridenhour earlier, is looking at out of ARPA funds, creating a limited term, we call it limited term, but basically, let's see what a clinician would look like on staff in the police department. The mayor and I sat and talked with the county about engaging mental health services with our police department, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So if you can't get the assistance you ask for, perhaps you have to create it yourself. And so bringing on a clinician within the police department to work in its outreach efforts and trying to help those that need help is one of the things. It's a $250,000 would be, and that would be obligating it through. We have this dilemma because we prefer it to be an employee, and so that's what we're looking at. So $250,000 would pay for it through December of 2024. If you contract for it, it could go through December of 26. So we're looking at it either being, we'd probably prefer it to be our own employee under a limited term, but know that you get more. You can use more of the ARPA funds, the restricted side, if it was a contracted service, because you could obligate the funds under a contract versus you can't obligate an employee, if that makes, it's just a subtlety, something that Maria and I spent time kind of trying to, so you can spend more money on contracting out than you can your own employee, but that's the realities of it. And that is the one annotation I want to make.
I appreciate that because yes, we have sat on meetings with the county. We have asked for the services, and this is where we are. And we are dealing with the homeless and the services that they need. So,
Just a question.
Yes.
So in either case, if that does happen and there, whichever funding term happens, if once a necessity is kind of proven, is Measure I or H eligible?
And that's what we would be. Yeah, I just wanted to. I was talking with Jason about it earlier today, and I just want we're not in the. These are hard costs. That's just kind of a soft cost and personnel costs, which is more reserved for your budget stuff. But I did want to mention, as part of the homeless services has been talking about looking at a position within the police department that would be non-sworn, clinician-based, and working side by side with a dedicated officer to try to provide services and to provide the assistance that hopefully they desire.
I think it's great to mention it's a step in a different direction, so appreciate the comment.
and the staff person would be a non-sworn. It would just be, okay. And just a question on a side note, when we're talking about the ARPA funding, only because I've seen how the outline is, and only because I stressed at the homeless task force meeting the other day when we went to ask for some of the county funding as we looked for the probability with the expansion. The navigation, the Welcome Center is positioned to expand, and to know that the funds have already been exhausted, that could be a probability?
Well, the county has programmed all of its funds into the 99 Palms and the Sequoia, I can't remember what it is, Sequoia apartment
Vegas.
projects. So, yeah, so they've put all of the project home key into those two, and then they have programmed all of their, so all the monies that are coming from the state for homeless services, they're then programming to provide that. And it's 100 rooms between the two. Each of them are at 50. So, council member and I had a meeting with a developer that's developing phase one of an affordable housing project on Pioneer that is interested in doing similar to Finca Serena, doing a permanent supportive housing under, and we're not going to be able to get there by project Home Key 3.0, which is coming around, which the county, it's funny when you talk to Visalia and they don't know what the county's doing in Visalia, but they're going to do a juvenile runaway foster for juvenile foster runaways in Visalia. That's what they're going to do with, they're going to submit an application for Project Home Key 3.0.
The 3.0.
So I guess one of the objectives or strategies could be to work with, and you have the funds, again, through to help facilitate the process, looking at a permanent supportive housing project in tandem with the project on Pioneer.
Thank you. Okay. Council, we've been provided with a lot of information this evening with regard to many different projects. Do you have any questions? To anything that was presented to us this evening?
I don't have questions, but I would like to go through it.
Please.
Each, category if we can as a group.
Okay.
And so we can prioritize or make comments or
Okay, well,
if that's okay.
I'm looking at the staff report that was submitted, and you're looking at the project
I was
list?
looking at project,
Okay.
but I will go to the staff.
Because there's summaries of, for instance, it starts with street improvements. It starts with street improvements.
And looking, excuse me, if I may.
Please go
I'm
ahead.
just looking at the projects for street improvements. I think Morton is definitely a major, and that's one of the highest priorities.
That's
And we-
one.
And Main Street, of course. Newcomb, you know, and so I just think we definitely need to keep the funding in that, in those three projects, and possibly all of them. Henry is for the extension of Murray Park, is that correct? Put in the curb and gutter? And do we have any idea when we're gonna extend that park or get funding to complete that project?
Working on it right now. CSET's actively out there working right now on improvements, and they have a couple of different grants that they're, it's been frustrating because, well, everything's been bogged down. You know, so they've had commitments of funding, which they got their first and went out and did improvements, and they had other funding, and then that got held up, and now finally they're back out working again.
Okay. So I think that's definitely necessary. And I think all our streets needs improvements, but, you know, if we can go to the proposed projects or streets and that Mr. Wallace gave us and
The proposed
street projects, yes. Let me find it again.
This one? Proposed projects?
Proposed projects, that one.
Okay,
Yes.
you have to go down a little bit further. It's before public facilities.
Still haven't found it. Okay.
There it is.
Now, I have a question in the Teapot Dome on that one, proposed projects. The purple piping, is that what that's for? Just to, or we would add piping all the way out for, at Teapot Dome, that project, the 8,060,000,
That's all just road.
just road.
So much of that is in the county, and they don't have, the county doesn't put a foundation, they don't put a road, they just do pavement on top of native material. They don't they don't put in a rock foundation, and so that's why the roads fall apart. So this would be a complete reconstruction of Teapot Dome between 65 and West
to the-
Street.
Okay.
And there'd probably be, I would anticipate a roundabout at Newcomb and Teapot Dome, and probably one at West and Teapot Dome as well. It could be a controlled intersection, but there'll be controlled intersections. If you're going to widen them, and there's going to be other funding that comes. You know, I listen to those that are smarter than me, and Ted Smalley says, John, there's a bunch of money that's going to be coming for roads as long as you account for active transportation kinds of things. So we're currently doing an ATP plan with the city and the tribe, which is looking at improvements on the reservation with, the mayor and I were just up there on Friday on that, looking at improvements on the reservation, but also looking in the airport area as part of the casino and city facilities over there. By putting bike lanes in on Teapot Dome and curb and gutter and landscaping, there'll be funds that will be coming available through the state.
Okay, great.
Similar to ATP. I mean, it could be under ATP. That would help with road reconstruction. We're just giving you a number that kind of just says this is the number. And again, this is out there, 5 or 6 years. I'm just wanting to put it on your radar, these big projects that are out there. And they're funded, you have funding for them through TCAG.
All right, good. That's a good segue into what I want to ask. Speaking of money, and let's talk about the elephant in the room is Castle. Is it any way or any possibility we get money from Measure R or TCAG to realign that or extend Castle?
You have the money. You just have to make, if that's your priority, then you've already had the streets there. So if that becomes the street that you want, we will begin working on it.
But it has to be annexed first, is that correct, before we can work on it? Or is Castle already in city limits?
That I don't know.
That alignment of Castle is already in the city of Porterville.
The alignment is already in the city limits?
Correct.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the proposed alignment that Mr. Ennis spoke of earlier, the S-curve, would be currently in the city of Porterville.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that.
Well, no, that was, and we have money in the budget for that already? Or do we have money for that, or do we have to rearrange
It is your,
funding.
this is your work schedule, so you determine what is your priorities. We're accountable to whatever your direction is.
Okay, well, I realize that, but is there money?
No, this is,
I know, but,
there is money for it if you say there is.
okay. Okay, that's easy enough. All right, thank you.
It just may stretch out some of those other, I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm
You can't,
saying.
you can't say,
Are we
well, I want
gonna
all
have-
the streets redone.
Yeah.
You can, but
Exactly.
it won't all happen in the next year.
Are we gonna have to push something back in order to make that happen? That's what I'm asking.
Well,
Is there-
you're going to have to start, on acquisition, environmental, I mean, just as you do with every road that I showed you.
Okay. So we still have to acquire some property for that extension?
You don't own any. You don't own it.
I thought a portion of it was already owned by the city. None? Okay.
I have the feeling, though, that there may be some goodwill attached to the project if it should go forward, so hoping that works out and that the solution would be as productive as some of the voices had been loud. Well, I think that maybe reaching forward, we'd be able to figure out how to do that in a cost-effective way. I echo your sentiments with Castle, and I think that, if I had to move it around, I think Castle is up there on that list of proposed projects. I know Measure R has a big potential for not that project, but other projects, as well as the matching funds for the FAA for the West realignment. Hopefully there's some savings in there, finding some funding or matching funds for other projects. So I agree that that is the elephant in the room, and some of the other, just like 4th Street, that's kind of in the neighborhood of some other projects that we're undertaking. There's been some talk about developments in the area of Castle, so that is definitely a hot topic of discussion, and any steps towards resolving that, I think, would be beneficial.
And the last thing I want to ask about is the American Rescue Plan Act, and you mentioned there may be a couple of $100,000 left in that possibly, or if we could put the golf course netting in that and get it done.
Again, you say that's your project and it'll get done.
All right. So,
Well,
all right.
let me say this. If the council says that that is our project,
Exactly.
it will get done.
If the 5 of us, or the majority of us, 3 of us anyway.
3 votes, yeah, as you said, 3 votes and it happens.
And there's one other thing on the golf course that, and I forgot to mention. The parking lot. I mean, it's dirt. I mean, it's horrible. I don't know if, is there any plans for that?
Yeah, it's in our work plan.
Okay.
It's not next year. I don't know, Donnie, when I know that they're all subject to,
It should have been 2 years ago. I mean, it's bad. Yeah. Is that something that our road crew could do? Is that a parking lot there like that, or?
There is some parking lot maintenance funds available. We could take a look at that and provide an evaluation. We do have a pretty aggressive work plan scheduled for this next year. But we can prioritize that and take a look and provide some input back to the city manager in regards to scheduling that.
something's at my fault.
There you go.
Well, I mean,
If he wants to
To
do
be
it,
honest,
huh?
I just
well,
wanna
no,
say
here's it's just the, people talk about politics as like it's a bad thing. Politics is a science. It's just a competition of interests, right? So this is truly a politic, which is what is your priority? Do you want your your train crews to be in a parking lot or on Morton Avenue?
Well, see, and that's just it. I don't want to delay any streets for that parking lot. You know, that's when, if he comes back to me and says, you know, we can't get to it or whatever, then, okay,
Well,
we
and,
can't get to it.
and you have lots of folks that are saying, I want my street fixed.
Yeah, I'd rather fix the streets than that parking lot.
And that becomes just now, it's as Mike said, it's a very aggressive plan. Part of it's because of the casino. We have a significant, there in the vicinity of the fairgrounds. We have work that we need to do through our crews. Oh, Mike, I know you've got a really, well, and remember I said, you've got all of these, I mean, if you weren't doing sewer annexations, you'd have free time on your schedule. But you've got $14 million in projects that are going to be out tearing up former county roads, putting in sewer to serve homes that don't have it, and then you're coming back behind that with your crews. So you have this is what's not fair about it, is that I call it the politics of it, is that, yeah, they would normally do that, but we've got big projects that have already been directed and bid and underway.
I could also add to that. I mean, if it's a priority project, things happen and we find time depending on what's going on. With it being brought to determination that that's a priority project for one of the park ventures to get upgraded, we've been talking internally about other conditions, the parking lot at Zalad Park, and trying to evaluate the conditions on those and what the time frame those look like to pull those up to a schedule to make some maintenance repairs in there. Having that pulled forward and knowing that it's a priority, should we get a window of opportunity, then that would be an emphasis of importance.
It would be helpful to have that direction now, because I will tell you what will happen is that there will be some streets that are not in your program in July.
Right.
You don't know what those streets are, but Mike will know what those streets are, and they won't be on the list. So that it will be just a work similar to this. So if that's, yeah, we could do that. They'll, just when we come with the list of the streets, know that there will probably be some streets that won't be in the work program for next year to account for that.
Well, if he has a
That's what I
list
call
of
the
it.
politic of it.
Yeah.
Right? They can't be in two places at one time.
I understand that. And like I said, I'd rather have the streets done than the parking lot. And
But if you want it done, it'll get done. And we won't tell you.
says done.
And that way you won't know whose street didn't get fixed. But Mike will know, and then we'll say, and it was because you wanted the golf course paved parking lot done, that street didn't get done.
Please, go ahead.
I think, I know some of those parking lots are not in that one specifically, but maybe if we could see, if there is a plan or a schedule for some of those parking lots, if we could see that, and then that would help to anticipate a little bit of priority of those. I think the roads are the priority because everybody uses them. I also think, in thinking about the golf course netting and hearing the 2, 4, 6, so about 600,000 to fix them all, that's a plan. Just starting with maybe even looking at the first one that's in the worst condition, because I think safety is also an issue. So, that kind of thing might help us make some decisions on those, but I really like the projects that we have identified in here. It's taken a lot of planning, consideration, they're tied to grants, and they're planned in a way, I appreciate the city staff that they're planned in a way that we can try to utilize other funding, and then get more project for our money. So then our public and our community gets more, for that work. So I'm really looking at all these projects in that way and trying to narrow them down to what is going to benefit the city community the most.
Councilmember Tate, did you have any questions or any discussion or any input?
This on. There was, in the budgetary considerations, maybe open for discussion regarding the park impact fee report. I've heard Milt talk about this, or Councilmember Stowe talk about this in the past, and John mentioned, or our city manager mentioned, that this, when you look at other cities, there's quite a contrast. So that's theirs, so we can talk about that. And then talking about doing something to help this situation on Castle, could that be evaluated so that we see how much funding that it would take to do that, and then reprioritize some of these other, to be able to have the funding or use some of the funding that we might have to do that?
He mentioned it.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
it's right here.
great, thank you.
It's on here. I believe that all the projects are important. I'm just going to be right out and say that all the projects are of importance when it pertains to the infrastructure and, of course, with the maintenance of the city. Annexations, there are many stressed areas, and I'm always seeing the crews out there, Mr. Knight. And it goes back to the discussion. There are some annexation areas where some of the streets are probably in alignment with some of the Caltrans. I'm just going to use the one, for example, Cobb Street. Is that part of that, a Caltrans situation as well?
The Cobb Street is part of the sewer annexation, so it doesn't have complete infrastructure.
That whole area?
Yes,
That whole area, okay, that, and I know that because this city has annexed some stressful areas, and I empathize when I'm watching the crews and I see them go out there, especially when it's, if it's not the sewer, it has to do with the water, and then it has to do with the potholes, and it has to do with a lot of things. So again, you know, the sewer, the drainage, the road maintenance, and I know that this is just a side note, after having gone up to the reservation, listening to the pleas, that sidewalks were very important for a lot of the students. And I'm saying, well, we have some unfinished sidewalk areas too here in Porterville. And I'm just making a note of that. But again, we have a lot of decisions, and I think that the proposed projects that are here, including the Castle one, you know, this is what because these are the proposed ones to come in. But when you look at a lot of these things, you're aligning them to other connectivities, of course, with the Eagle Mountain, the casino, the Teapot Dome, then you have the airport and the doing all the, and then you have the sports complex out in that area. So aligning the projects to come forward to things that will be connected, and yet everything that we have and we looked and was presented, they're all important. That's just my comment. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. I did want to mention that I'm supportive of moving the $500,000 into the hot mix overlay for Morton, just as a way to keep that drivable until the projects are completed. Streets are definitely important on the list, but when we're looking to perhaps dull the blade of politics when it comes to the parks, looking at some kind of district analysis of parks, that way the improvements are hopping around from the different districts to the parks. I think we each have some sort of park in our districts, so just that way the general public has a feeling that if it may not be their street, at least it's in their area, that an improvement is being done, but with streets being the priority.
I will echo that to the 500,000 to put the emphasis on Morton. I don't know if the other council members would agree to that, but that would be an emphasis.
I agree with the same, moving the 500,000 for the hot mix. So if we don't agree with something, is now the time to say, or just?
Yeah. These were your priorities, they're back to you, and you're welcome to change them.
I, so far on the street projects, I just think the castle's a newly added one. I'm just having a hard time, for myself, agreeing for 1.5 million for that project. That's just my feedback. Taken away from other street projects.
If I may, I was about to say the same thing about the Putnam, which I think just exemplifies a variance of opinions, I guess, on projects.
Councilmember Stowe, you've missed a discussion. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Pardon me? I understand. Okay. You are in favor of it? Okay. Councilmember Stowe is leaving. He has an emergency, and we will continue. We will continue, but he did make a comment. He said he would support the Castle Street if that's a decision in the direction we go, to be added as a project. Okay. So, Councilmember Reyes, why can't we just keep all of them in here? That's just my comment. Councilmember Tate, do you have any comment?
No, not at this time.
And we're talking about the proposed projects. That's on the emphasis. You have no comment on that. Okay. Councilmember Reyes expressed made his comment with regard to Putnam, but I'm looking at it with the probability of future TCAG and ATP funding. So I don't have a problem with that. And I will be respectful of Vice Mayor's position on the castle with regard to 1.5 million, the possibility of it being taken away from other street projects. I don't really want anything taken away from street projects. That's just my comment. I don't know.
That's why I mentioned evaluation of this, because of the compromise it could place on something else, but I think it should be part of what we're going to do in this budget, so that somehow or another find the fund or try to look at it and see what we can do.
How does council wish to proceed on this? I mean, for direction.
Well,
for direction
so
to staff.
with Castle, there's a lot of other things that have to happen probably before the 1.5 million is spent. So I think that the first thing that needs to happen is just the ability to start that, to look and see what happens, and then possibly with the proposed, being able to prioritize based off of what feedback we get. As you mentioned, there may be some grants and other funding for some of the projects. I think if I had to look at the proposed project list as an addition and then put it into priority, I think it's clear that Castle may be higher or Putnam may be higher depending on what we're looking at, but I think the best outcome is that they all have a look. But with Castle, there are some things that I acknowledge that need to be looked at that would probably determine other factors than the cost that we're seeing just for the street. So, and that would determine how realistic and how timely it can
Okay.
be resolved. So,
Okay. Please.
Oh, my button keeps getting stuck. I just think because it's just newly brought to us to be a priority. I guess my feelings are a little bit more on as city manager was discussing these proposed projects, we had some context to all of them. So like Teapot Dome, that's going to tie to the relocation project and the streets around there. The Westworth realignment, talking about traffic circulation and the airport. And then the Putnam, I noted a potential grant ATP. So I mean, there was like things that we could tie each of those to that would justify those. And so I just didn't feel comfortable at this point tonight saying that I support 1.5 for another project.
I respect that.
The most comparable I could make of a project, and it was before my time, was the pushing through of J Street, which facilitated the city's location of the public safety building there. And then there was development that was occurring on the other side of the, that was Sierra Meadows was being constructed. And so there was, and having J Street through was, I mean, it was the only, it was the best way to have connectivity to that. And so I know a home was there was a home that had to be purchased, the roundabout. I mean, again, this was all before my time, but that, you know, hearing of that, I mean, that's kind of the best example I have of where there's development occurring and where roads don't exist and houses are, and it just becomes part of the, you know, part of the acquisition. But it really becomes, is that, for that, there was the community purpose. There was a public safety building that ended up being constructed, and again, that J Street didn't go through. And so that was all part of that program in the early, you know, mid-2000s. I came in at the back end of that.
Okay, and just a kind of a clarifying question that, and I do acknowledge that Castle was added, but were there, and Member Stowe and I were the ones that asked for it to be added, were there any other council member additions to this list?
No.
Okay. Were all council members able to make
Yes.
suggestions? Okay, thank you.
And asked, is that it? And so, yes. So belt and suspender, yes.
Our community has been asking all of us for street improvements everywhere. Our community has asked us for library, the interim and the new, and the continued focus to that regard. There is an emphasis with the animal shelter and as to when and how, when is that going to happen? And I'm saying it's in the project, it is of vital importance. But again, as we speak, I always say that all the projects that are presented are important. It's just how do we look at that? And then, of course, we look at the tertiary treatment and all the things that have been brought to us, the improvements after the SART, the fire improvements, you know, with all that information. And again, with the airport improvements, with the emphasis of all the projects to that regard. But I want to bring this to the council members on the dais as to when we received the staff report with all the streets that are on there of vital, those are the ones that have been already in the projects to move forward with them. And the additional proposed projects would be with information to be brought back to us? Is that how council wishes to pursue that?
I think that's the best course of action. Some of the projects that are on there have been on there for years as we've been watching these projects roll down with the schedule and the availability of, I mean, materials has been a factor. So some of these have been things that we've been looking at for years. So not wanting to slow the progression of things that have been promised annually during sessions like this. But yeah, I think just a closer look to see if the proposed ones are possible would be the the best way to start, if that answers your question.
Yes, well, that's where I was putting it out for council members, because we have the projects, and they have been on there already for a few years, and then we had to deal with a lot of materials not being available or coming in at a higher price and having been brought to us for reevaluation with the dollar amounts, the increase, the adjustments that have had to been made. So if council is satisfied with the staff report that has been presented to us and are satisfied with looking at to where the proposed projects that were presented to us this evening, to come back to us as to see how they would fit within our budget? Anyone want to comment?
I would agree with that.
You would
I would agree with that.
You would agree with that?
I think if information were to come back to have the projects well-seated within our budget, after some analysis, then I think we'd probably all feel comfortable being able to accept them
Okay.
all. But I will acquiesce that it's possible that some may be tough to look at, so, but I trust staff to bring back the information.
Okay. Well, then I believe we have, if you're comfortable, then with how we have determined to consider the priority projects, do we need to take action? Or is it just is it recommendation? Thank you.
John, were you looking for action or is direction sufficient for tonight?
Direction is sufficient. It really gives us a place to work from in our continued budget development. So certainly we'll analyze Castle, with the comments, with Castle Street looking in. Because what you'll see, some of the other streets, you're gonna see what that, and where you place that in your, as I went through every street, going through like all of your priority streets, showing you how they, and the years that it would be implemented. I guess that becomes what you would see, okay, so is this the schedule you're looking at? Because, sometimes it's not a money issue, it's what it's a work issue. And how many projects? We're seeing that out of, what I would say is that if Castle were added, it's gonna be contracted out for design, and we're not seeing huge progress, because beyond city staff, engineering folks are having turnover at Rapid. Caltrans is hiring a bunch of people to work from home and for more money. And I hear this from cities, and I hear this from engineering firms that are losing folks to Caltrans. We've lost some of our planners to Caltrans, work from home and make more money.
Mm-hmm.
And, my dad wanted them guys. So that, I would say that's the, with it, we can take it on ourselves, but typically we've been sending out our street projects for design. We are doing more on those because of the amount of infrastructure that's involved in that, tertiary treatments and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit of the analysis that we've done, that we'll do design in-house. But generally speaking, like Main Street is out to plug up. And we're a little bit at the mercy as they move. And that's a symptom of the times right now.
Thank you.
But we also, I swear that we had parking lots in there. It's just a budgetary number, it's $150,000. So,
Okay.
we do, just as a placeholder, for parking lot in there, every year.
Thank you. All right, I think council members, you have provided your input, and we will now We've given staff direction from every direction. Now we will go into other matters. Is there anything? I'm going to start with Councilmember Tate. Anything under other matters?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reyes?
No, just want to thank everyone for their input and thank staff for all the information. It's tough to, and especially as I mentioned, a lot of these other projects have been coming down the road, no pun intended, for a long time with years in the making. And as we add some, we have to realize that maybe they'll be down the road. But just want to thank everyone for their input.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I'll echo Councilmember Reyes on that, thanking the staff for putting together these items. And, you know, just to dig in deeper into that, like I mentioned, having all of these considerations for each of the projects, whether it be tied to another project, trying to seek other funding, and then just staff applying for grants in general. I appreciate that, and I think it just adds to how much we want to see our city grow. So I appreciate that immensely. I'm really excited about all the public facilities and all those big projects. I think they're all in need, and I've heard from council members that these have been, you know, in planning for years. So I know a lot of people are asking about the library and the animal shelter and the fire station improvements. I don't think there's anything we can't agree on here. And I do appreciate adding, because these were topics that were brought up last time, were the lighted baseball field and the Hayes field lighting. So I just wanted to add, you know, because I think our community is starting to be out in the public. I think the young people, you know, want to be somewhere safe. So I think addressing those in this plan are really good. And, you know, I just want to thank the city manager for putting this presentation together with us with so much detail and information. And then just comment, as you bring that back, looking at the funding, because we talk about that funding a lot, but also what you mentioned earlier, the schedule. So anything that we add is going to also add into our schedule, and there's only so much we can do. So I appreciate that, and that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
I want to thank staff. Their work does not go unnoticed. And there's so many projects and the beautification efforts that are aside from what we're doing on the 190 and the 65 and the different. I think Mr. Reidenauer and I were invited on the hottest days of the year to go out and look at the 190 and looking at different areas with TCAG and the partnerships with Caltrans, and just, it's immense. And over on the 65, and then we were just up on the reservation yesterday with the partnership and the collaboration to look at what they have and how, with the ATP, it was just interesting to go up there, and it was a very educational experience with the chairman and council member to take us through the different areas to look at and what their needs are, to talk to the children, so, and to talk to the adults. This is our community, the projects that are here before us, and they're all important. I keep echoing, I keep saying that, but all the projects that have been brought forth are important to each and every one of us. It pleases me to see staff in the audience tonight, and it pleases me to see Maria smiling in the back. I haven't seen her in a long time. It's all been virtual, and she never turns the camera on. But I know she's there because she's listening to us. Your work doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you very much. Mr. Lawless?
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments on the grants. Two grants that I failed to mention beyond the $10 million one that was applied for the library. So there was an additional grant that Mr. Moore's staff applied for the 4th Street. Again, it's a matter of trying to, out of the Prop 68, the strategy is to try to make as much money as much of that grant award go into the building and then the surrounding piece. So there was another grant which we felt could be used in addition to that, which he's applied for, which he's had a follow-up, which is good news. They've followed up. And then we haven't heard anything yet, which was to further expand the mini pitch. There was a $3 million grant that was applied for as well. So, I mean, there's always a number of grants. In fact, Mr. Wright and I was talking about the next cycle of ATP is up, which, you know, so it's the same question, which is to go after it, but what is the project that you're going to, because we're in a circumstance, I mean, you're in a good place because you have Measure R money that you can use as your entry into a lot of doors. That tomorrow, the mayor and I are going to be speaking to the California Transportation Commission. And the reason we're speaking is because we have a bunch of Measure R money that has been set aside for bike and ped, alternative transportation, as well as regional Measure R, which provides lots of leveraging opportunities. And so, so that becomes kind of and how long can you spread out $20 million? That's kind of become the game, is keep moving that 20 million along as you get other grant funds to be able to pay for it. We're not going to be able to get a grant for the bridge on the bike and ped. It's not. That's just one you're going to have to bite off almost $4 million to do. But the other pieces of that along, and whether it's lighting or those sorts of things, even if you don't succeed at the state level, like we did with the first 8 million, you still can fall back on the locally funded match, just as we did with, I talked about Putnam being a half grant award. That's not at the state level, that's at the local level, at TCAG's level, with a $500,000. So similarly, that becomes the play, is how many times can you apply for something and at least use the local matches here along with your Measure R. So it's what I appreciate about the staff is that they're always looking for that next opportunity and how to leverage it into, and I would say, you know, making the money last longer.
Thank
And
you.
appreciate the council's patience and dedication this evening.
Thank you very much. Well, it is 8:56. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.